So I'd like to welcome everybody to a joint meeting with Metaphor Inc. and Consciousness Cafe. My name's Mark Brooks, and I'm on the leadership team for both groups. But I wanted to let everybody know about Metaphor Inc., which is a community for authors and would-be authors who want to write in the spiritual and metaphysical genres. And we want to give you that special, we want to give you that special oomph to get your book out there if you write in these genres, and also be able to talk to people who know what you're talking about and can give you some good feedback in terms of the information that you're presenting, especially if you're talking about different aspects of the paranormal or the metaphysical or the spiritual. We have a lot of authors who have written in those genres. So that's the great thing about Metaphor Inc., and we hope you'll take advantage of it. One of the things we wanted to talk about is podcasting, and we have podcasting as the topic for this month and next month. This month, we're going to talk about being a guest on podcasts, and we have Kathy McDaniel here who we'll speak to in just a minute. And we'll do a little celebration for her when we get her on. But she's written a book called Misfit in Hell, Heaven Expat, and you can see the picture of her book in the background by her window. And we'll get her to talk about her book briefly, but we're going to talk about the podcast that she's been on this evening. And then in February, we're going to have the co-hosts of the Skeptic Metaphysicians podcast.
Oh.
Yeah, and they've won some awards for their podcast that they do, and they do a very good job. They're actually video production professionals in their day jobs, and so they do a very good job with their podcast. So we're going to ask them about being a host on on podcasts and how you could use podcast hosting as a way to market your book as well, or to get your name or your brand out there. So tonight we have Kathy McDaniel. And she's coming to us from the West Coast out in the Seattle area. So this is one of the advantages of Zoom. You'd never be able to meet Kathy if we had these face-to-face meetings, but we're able to talk to her quite a bit through Zoom. So we're happy to have you here, Kathy.
Thank you.
And I want to tell everybody, go to your reactions and do a little celebratory for Kathy has booked her 100th podcast guest session. And she did that within the last few days. So congratulations, Kathy.
Thank you. That was a goal of mine.
Well, I'm glad you reached it. I mean,
before I died, I wanted to have that many. So.
And it's taken you how long?
2.5 years.
Okay. And about how many do you do a week?
Depends. I can do as many as 4. I try and limit myself to that, and I don't do any more than 2 a day.
Oh, wow.
It's a real business, It takes a lot of time.
Cool. So before we get into podcasting details, talk to us a little bit about your book so people can be familiar with the book that you wrote. Just a couple minutes. Sure.
It's a memoir. It's about my life before, during, and after a distressing near-death experience, and how it upended my life when I got back, physically, mentally, spiritually, every way you can, and how it took me 10 years to get to IANDS and find somebody who would finally listen to me and understand. Took another 10 years before I had the guts to write my book, with some issues being resolved, and now I'm using it to help people understand that God is all loving and all forgiving and doesn't send anybody to hell. Amen.
Oh, that's cool. And I'll do a little shameless plug for our March meeting. March 28th, we have Elizabeth Sabet on, who's the former president of Assn, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. And she's going to talk to us about spiritual emergencies, which is one of the first things Kathy was talking about, and seeking out IANDS. And it took her 10 years to get to IANDS to get some emotional support for what she was going through. Because a lot of times when people have spiritual experiences, they don't know what happened to them. They don't know who to talk to. And the people they do talk to either tell them to shut up or distance themselves from them, or think you're crazy or whatever. And I don't know, Kathy, if you want to add any into that.
Well, it's all of the above. You just feel so all alone. It's terrible.
Yeah. So Elizabeth's going to talk to us about spiritual emergencies on March 28th. So we hope you'll join us for that. The co-hosts for the Skeptic Metaphysicians are going to talk to us on Tuesday, February 21st. So we've got all those things lined up for you. Now, the other thing you talked about, Kathy, too, this is one of the big hurdles that people who write in the spiritual and metaphysical genre have to go to, is just working up the guts to make yourself vulnerable and write about what you've done. Could you talk about the process you had to go through to get to that?
Well, I kept hearing the voice tell me I needed to write, and I wasn't that familiar with a voice back then. I just thought it was a nuisance. And eventually I got to a conference, an IANDS conference, and ran into a lady who was a medium. I didn't know what that was. And she was going off on her own as a publisher. So she stepped in front of me one time when I kept walking past her booth, and she says, "They said you need to write a book."
Oh my
And I
goodness.
had no idea what she meant about they, but she gave me her card and badgered me into writing the book. And it took all of that. She was very supportive, and I think she was probably a Marine drill sergeant in a previous life. But,
Oh boy. Okay.
got the job done.
Okay, that's cool. So with Elizabeth, Assist is one organization that can help you with what Kathy went through and what I've went through and what a number of other people have gone through. But IANDS is another group that can do that too. And could you talk to us just a little bit about IANDS and what it is and what it means and what they do?
It's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. It was founded about 40 years ago, and most of the founders are still around, still writing books. And it's grown into an international group where it's just a fellowship and those conferences. I mean, you go to those things and the energy is so intense. Nobody wants to go home. It's just, I think the formerly dead people are probably my favorite people. They're more fun than anybody.
There you go. And so you can meet people who have been through the same experience that you've been through, or a similar experience. And I think that's important too. That's one of the largest conferences of its type around in the country, I believe. They've done a very good
It's
job with their
wonderful.
conferences.
Yeah.
Now, have you spoken at an IANDS conference?
I was on a panel a couple years ago, and then this year we're going to try and get a workshop for helping the distressed near-death experiencers. They're in the shadows. They don't come out. They come to these conferences and it's all about the glorious, happy ones, and they slink around and think there's really nothing for them. And so we need to remedy that.
Okay. And while we're at it, could you give us a shameless plug for the Distressing NDE conferences or sessions that you do with IANDS?
Right. Daniel and I do a sharing group. I think a second, we keep changing the dates. You'd have to check the IANDS calendar, but it's a small group and it's a safe place to go and know that people understand what the troubles you're having with integrating and having people talk to you. And it's fun. We'll start off and sometimes they'll show up and they have no face or anything. And the next group, they'll have their face, and the next group they'll talk. It's just been really wonderful. I'm so glad we've done it.
That's cool. And Daniel actually put up the IANDS link. So if you are not familiar with IANDS, you can get it in the chat. If you look in the Zoom chat, you'll have it. So let's talk about podcasting.
Let's. I think that's the most fun thing I've ever done. Thank God for COVID. If it weren't for that terrible pandemic, we would not have all been stuck in our houses. And it gave us time to really, I think, do a little inward introspection and then get so tired of being alone. We ventured out. I saw an article recently that says right now there's 160 million podcast listeners. And by next year, there'll be another 20 million and approximately 424 million listeners globally per month. So it's just amazing how with a podcast, I've been to, I don't know how many countries, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, Ireland, Germany, Colombia, Canada, Virgin Islands, Hawaii. It's just amazing. You don't have to pack a suitcase or pay for a plane ticket. And it's just brought people together from all over the world. It's just miraculous, I think.
Cool. And they use podcast networks to circulate the podcasts around, but you don't have to worry about that as a guest. That's more for the hosts.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing. You just show up. That's what I really like about it. I wouldn't be a podcast host. I just don't have the tech skills for it.
Good. So would you recommend being a podcast guest if you're marketing a book?
Oh, gosh. I think that's the best way to get your book out, to get your name out, to actually promote it yourself, and it's free. There's nothing bad I can come up with for a podcast, except for the times that you get kind of a snarky podcast host, and they get back at you by putting an awful picture of you on the internet for the episode, and you're going, oh man, because that the internet's forever, and you have to be careful and not rattle their chains.
Well, we'll talk about your podcasting experiences, good, bad, and ugly, here in a minute. Just to give you well, I don't know if you know, how many views have you had across all of your 100 podcasts? Have you ever tried to calculate that?
It was interesting because I was keeping track, and up until a couple of months ago, it had gotten up to, I think, 160,000 views. And then I went on one podcast, and I had no idea this guy was, and doubled in one podcast.
What?
So I've got 320,000 views.
Wow.
Little old me in Gig Harbor.
Wow.
I was insane.
Wow.
You get on a podcast and you think, this isn't, whatever, I'll show up, I'll be a good sport. And then you just never know when you're going to go bingo.
Wow. So, but did you have to work up to it? Because I know if you wanted to get the bigger venues, the bigger podcasts and stuff, you have to kind of like do the legwork, put in the blood, sweat, and tears to hone your
right. Well, because it depends. Now, spirituality is big right now, and it has been for the last couple of years. Now, mine was about a negative NDE. So once the word got out in the other podcast that something really different had come along, I was very fortunate. I just got on one show. It was Kirsty Salisbury over in New Zealand. And then Jeff Mara said he saw that. And then somebody else said they saw Jeff Mara. And it just, you never know which one's going to be the one. You have to kind of trust in the process. You have to show up, show up and talk. That's what you do on a podcast, and let the universe take care of the rest of it.
Okay. How do you prepare for a podcast?
Well, before I will go on one, at first I was, like anybody else, I'd go on anybody else that asks me. After a while, when I had a couple of situations happen, I thought I need to be a little bit more selective. So when someone asks me now, it's usually through the podcast collab group or podcastguest.com. So they're kind of pre-screened, but every now and then I'll get somebody that's just starting their own podcast or whatever, but I'll ask them for a link to their show, and I will go and watch that show. And there's a place that says how many views they've got. There's a place that says how many subscribers they've got. And I mean, if their camera's falling over, if the dog's running through, you kind of know. But if they're at all serious, everybody starts at the beginning. So I'm all in for getting on a show that's their first. I won't go on a first one anymore, but I'll go on a second one. And I'm careful now about, especially in spirituality, there's some strong opposition to what we believe out there. And I've had to be careful in certain areas of the United States. I don't go there anymore because I get crucified, basically. And one show, it was just melee with the people calling in and stuff. And there was something like, I don't know, 120 responses that, all she had to do was call on Jesus or John 4, section 9, Pier 4, all that was in 100. And I made myself read them all. And I found 4 that said, wow, I really enjoyed her talk. So that's another thing you have to be kind of careful of. If you're sensitive, you may not want to read all the reviews, but I make myself do it just to know how I'm affecting people. So I don't want to go to those places where I'm going to upset people. It's not about me being egged. It's about it's not going to do any good. You got to have to use your head.
Right.
Your heart too.
Now, and when you say certain parts of the country, would that be certain podcasts as well?
Yes. I have a lady right now who is very, very evangelical, and she wants me on her podcast so bad. And I said, honey, I just don't think that's going to work out. And she wrote back and says, yes, but it's so different. It'll be interesting. I said, let me send you a free book.
Yeah. And
I sent her a free Kindle book yesterday. And I says, please read that first. And if you still want me on afterwards, I'll do it. Right. So we'll see what happens.
Now, do some podcast hosts talk to you beforehand, or do they just get you on and have the call and do the podcast live stream right there? Do you have any?
It depends. It depends. Some people he'll say, I didn't read your book. I know nothing about you. I just heard you were on this podcast and I want to have a surprise for me and my audience. That's cool. And then there's others that will say, no, we have to have a pre-screening. We'll ask you a few questions, see if you're fit. So it just varies.
Okay. Well, let's talk about these 2 organizations that you belong to and that I belong to too, thanks to you, and how they help people who want to be podcast guests. Right.
There's 2 of them. And I don't know how I found them, but I was giving up with trying to, this is a long process to do this yourself, but it's podcastguests.com. The thing I really liked about them is they have a way to make your one sheet. That's the thing that's got all your information, your links, your all of that. And it's hard to make your own if you don't know what it's supposed to look like. So they have a free area where you can put all that information in, and then you can later cut and paste it and put it in other places. But that's really, really good. And it's only, $10 a month or something if you buy in for a year. And also, they have a guest directory where the podcast host can contact you directly. I guess they don't charge them, and so they're fishing in there all the time. So you just get something in an email that says so and so from this podcast is interested in having you on there, and all you have to do, like I say, is check them out, then fill out their form, and boom. The other one is the podcastcollab.com. I put both of those addresses into the chat so that people can find them.
Could you do that again? Could you put it in the chat again for them?
Daniel going to do that for us?
Oh, he did. He did already. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's really worth looking up. The other one is about $15 a month, and they have thousands of people in directories. So you can go in and say, okay, I'm looking for spirituality, and they'll come up with all the podcasts that have them, and where they are and what they require and all of that stuff. And then you can contact them and say, I'm interested in being on your show. They also provide a couple of emails twice a week, I think it is, with about 10 podcasts they're looking for people. And also they'll list 10 podcasts guests looking for a place to go, and you can pay a little bit extra and be on that side too. But between the 2 of them, that should keep you pretty busy.
And you would recommend that for people who are in the spiritual and metaphysical genres?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of you just go under I think on the first one you get two categories, and so I go under spirituality and other. And then on the other one, you just get one category, and I just go under spirituality. That takes care of Reiki masters and mediums and people with spiritual books. It's a very large category, so there's lots to fish for.
Now, have you gotten all of your guest appearances off of these 2 sites?
No.
How did people find out about you? It was word of mouth, I guess, was part of it.
Yeah, just getting on the first one is the hardest. And then just what you can do is you can go on Google or you can you can do that and go on to some spirituality couple of podcasts and say, oh, I'd like to be on that show. Then you just get their email address and approach them singly, you know, and you can do that. And sometimes you'll get something back, but that's kind of tedious.
Okay. So what's the process like when someone, a podcast host, agrees to have you as a guest, or they send you an invitation and you accept? What's the process that you go through to, get on the podcast? I know you said it varies. Some people kind of shoot off the hip and other people are very deliberate or have this process that you go through before you get on.
Well, before you can get on, you've got to back up and do a few things. You've got to find yourself a nice, quiet space, all right? And you've got to find good lighting. You've got to get a computer that's got either a good microphone or you've got to get a microphone. You have to get headsets sometimes. You have to make sure you can have some quiet time without the kids busting in or the dog running through the house. You've got to really prepare a lot of that beforehand. You've got to find some clothes that you can use in different situations. Some are more formal, some are more easygoing kinds of places. You don't want to get too dressed up, so you've got to have that just have it done. Another thing I think is important is you need to start. This is a business, and you need to start keeping track of which podcast you're on, the date, the name of the podcast, and the podcaster. And I usually put a little note in there. He said he'll send the link in February, or this guy was really fun, or something. And then just keep those in track, because when you get down the line and you've got the people that are really up there, they're going to want to see where you've been and what kind of podcasts you've been on. So if you've got all that available, it makes it more likely that you'll get them. So you don't just think one day. The first main thing is you got to have a book,
right?
If you've got to have a published book, or the other thing is it's going to be launched soon. Otherwise, they won't take you. So you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah. So you mentioned a one sheet. And how podcast guests and the Podcast Collaboration Club will actually do a write-up on you. What's the importance of having that, when you're doing podcasting? Because when that fellow, in other words, if you're on the Podcast Collab, they require, or you got to have it, because that's what they're. Now I've got a list here of what has to be on it. You have to have a link to your photo and your book cover. A list of topics you can cover, a list of the podcasts you've been on, links to all your social media. That's another thing you got to do ahead of time. You got to get a Facebook account, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. If you don't know how to do it, you better learn, because they are all gonna want you to have those things, because they'll say in there, if I put you on my show, what can you do for me? And I can say, I got 6,200 LinkedIn accounts. I've got so many Facebooks. That makes a difference. They're doing this for free. We have to collaborate. It's give and take. You've got to be able to put. And the other thing they ask for that I think is funny: what questions can I ask you? They don't want to sit down and think of questions. They don't even know you. So if you say, well, ask me about why I wrote my book, ask me this and that. And then that's very helpful. The more professional you are on this, the more likely they are to take you in. They don't want to train you, and they also want links to your website, where to buy your book. So if you don't have a website, you got to get on that. That's very important. And you've got to be able to buy the book on the website. This is work. This is a business, and you got to take it seriously. Even though it's fun, it's really a lot of work. Right. Now, in getting ready for that first podcast, if you've never done a podcast before, I know the Podcast Collaboration Club, they have virtual mixers, they have documents that you can work your way through what you want to say, how you want to say it. what are the points you want to make? Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I found those to be really helpful.
That is helpful. I think it depends on you. What is it that you're trying to get across? Why are you on that podcast? You need to really focus. What am I'm trying to accomplish? You've been trying to accomplish selling your books. Are you going to accomplish getting a message out there, especially in the spiritual realm? Sometimes we just want to share what we've learned and encourage people to do better in their lives too.
Mm-hmm.
So once you can answer that question, then you can kind of start saying, okay, in order to do that, I have to do this, this, and this. So it's kind of individual.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about the equipment that you need to have. And so that part of podcasting is not free. Podcasting is free once you get all the equipment up there. It's like free publicity, but you need to get set up in order to do it. And you said you've got to have your book or coming soon. You know, that's one of the prerequisites. Let's talk a little bit about the equipment that you need. We'll hit the video first. Any tips on videos, cameras, or do you use a regular camera or just a webcam, or what do you use?
Yeah, I've got a fairly new computer. It's I don't know what they call it. I'm not tech savvy. I don't think it's it's a computer. It's a newer computer, and it's got a good video camera, and it's got a good mic on it. It's only like a year and a half old. And then I went to Bed Bath & Beyond and found makeup mirrors, and I've got them. I've been all over the place looking for mirrors, and they're like on little pedestals. I got them on either side. Then I had to get something to plug those in to put them in my USB port. And then the background, you know, you have to kind of make a background for yourself. You can use virtual backgrounds if you're, you know, doing this out of your garage. That's cool. You can put your own pictures into, you know, and or like Daniel does sometimes with the universe and all that. It looks kind of cool in the background. You kind of have to, I guess, get on something like this where you can talk with other people and get their advice. It's really tough to start at ground zero all by yourself.
Right. Now, what do you use for a microphone?
I just use the computer.
Oh, you're coming across very well.
Yeah, that's what people say.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a regular microphone. I was going to say, I mean, I wish I could show you here. I have a Rode microphone. I've got a little dynamic mic here on a drum stand. They have tabletop stands too. This is the same thing, but you want a good heavy weight if you're going to put a stand on your table. You know, so you got that. And just to talk about the different microphones for people who don't know, they have two different types, a condenser microphone and a dynamic microphone. And you may or may not know this, but I'll do a little bit of the nerd talk, I guess.
Okay.
The dynamic microphones point straight at you. You know, you talk directly into the dynamic mic, and it doesn't pick up anything around you. But a condenser microphone picks up everything around you. And so they say if you're using a condenser microphone, you may want to use earbuds or use a headset to block out the speakers from your computer, you know, that would be talking to you. Now, I have my speakers on my computer, and I have a dynamic microphone. So I don't get the reverb that you would get if you had a condenser microphone for that. But you need to have good audio, you need to have good video, and at a minimum 1080p. I know if you have a computer, so you want high quality video, and if you can get a 4K video, if your computer can drive that, that would be nice too. But YouTube will only do like 720p. There's a way you can trick it to get 1080p and get a higher resolution video out of it, but I won't really go into that. But
is that more for a podcaster to know, the host?
Well, it's good for a guest to know. I'm glad you asked that.
Okay.
It's good for a guest to know, because especially with the video and audio, you need to have good quality, because that's part of your presentation too, just like the clothes you wear and how you present yourself on the screen. And also too, I want to draw people's attention to your book cover on your back wall. You know, you've got to have your book up there. That's that subtle marketing tip
Right.
right there, you know. So
And then you have to turn your screen around so that it shows like that.
yes.
Otherwise it shows up backwards.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Because I've seen so many people that have the writing backwards on the books in their bookcase behind them.
I know, it's like,
And you don't know that unless you're looking at the videos. So that's a good tip going on. Another thing about the microphones too, there's two different types of mics, cables to go in. And if you want to do a real quick and dirty setup and a cheap setup, you can use or buy a microphone that has a USB connection into your computer and just route it straight into your computer. So you'll have a high quality microphone going into your computer and you'll get that taken care of. But the downside of that is if you ever want to upgrade, and the upgrade is to something called XLR, and it's a round 1/2-inch plug with 3 pins in it, and it goes into audio mixers. That's better quality than the USB, but if you have a USB microphone, you're going to have to toss it away or give it to somebody or whatever because you can't use it. There's some microphones, you can buy an XLR microphone with this little 1/2-inch plug on the bottom of it and do a transition device that costs about $50 that'll go from XLR to USB. And then it has a little volume control, you know, and a power control on it, but you have to power an XLR microphone. You don't have to power a USB mic. So that's the difference between the two. But if you want to get started quick and dirty, get a USB dynamic microphone is the one I would recommend, and just have it pointing straight at you. Use the speakers from your computer and a high quality video camera. I'm using a Logitech, well, it just says HQ 1080p, but Logitech makes very good video cameras. So if you don't use the camera that's in your computer, like Kathy's doing, and Kathy, you have a great setup. So if you can find a high quality computer, that's a good way to kind of build everything in for you. But I hope that gives you a good appreciation for the background for that. But I want to say, adding it all up, that's probably $300, $400, $500, between 3 and 5. I don't know what your experience was, Kathy. I'm just a rough estimate, or you don't know.
You mean the computer?
Oh, well, that's right. You did it at the computer.
Yeah, it was kind of pricey, but I got it at Costco on sale. So
okay.
It's the cost of doing business. And if you're in this business to make money, you're in the wrong business. This is not something that I don't think I'll ever see anywhere near the money I put out to get this book and all that. But for me, see, that's the question I asked myself. You in this to make money? No, good, because you won't. But I certainly am fulfilling my purpose on this planet. So that's worth a whole lot more.
Right. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel, especially when you're getting over this hurdle of your first book and putting it out there that you're a medium or you're an intuitive or you've had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. That is such a big hurdle to get over. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people from publishing or from being on videos or from being on conferences or Zoom calls or whatever. So hopefully that's one of the challenges that Metaphor.Inc. can help you with, talking to the people on the call and the people listening afterwards. We can help you do that. So
another little tip, before you go on, there's something called a zoomtest.com that you can get on, and it'll give you what you're going to look like, what your lighting's like. If you forgot to get that lipstick off the front of your teeth, oh shoot, I laid the dirty clothes on the back of the couch. So it really is well worth that. And it's free. Just takes you 10 minutes.
Okay. And is that zoomtest.com? I've never.
I think so. I just put Zoom test up there and it comes up.
And that's a good check. Also, too, you mentioned lighting. I didn't mention lighting, and you can look at my lighting too.
Great. Yours is great.
I fiddled with the lights in my place for like an hour and a half, cutting one off, cutting one off,
Yeah.
and getting what I want. So I've got a hall light and a kitchen light about 15 to 20 feet away from me. And so that does everything. And then I have a white background, so you don't see the shadows. You see some shadows, but
It looks good.
the lights are up in the ceiling, so you don't see the shadows like it would be one straight on you. And that's a whole other thing to be aware of. Now, when we talk to the podcast hosts, the skeptic metaphysicians, they can talk to us more about, you know, the lighting and the setup and things like that, because that's part of their business and day-to-day stuff.
All right. Another one that comes up, because when I was on their show, it was a debacle. A lot of us NDers, when we come back, we have electrical issues.
Oh, yeah.
And I was trying, everything went wrong. They had to switch computers. I mean, part of the time we couldn't see him at all. It was, at least they had great senses of humor, and we were really making fun of this whole situation. But I'd say at least 35% of the time I go on, something goes wrong with the electrical. And I always apologize. They say, well, that can't be you. And I said, no, this happens a lot. And if you get a podcast host and a guest that are both NDers,
right,
it can really be interesting.
Right, right. So let's talk about some of your podcast experiences. What's some of the good, bad, and ugly? I mentioned that before.
I have so much fun on this. I have had maybe 2 or out of 100 that I got off and thought, well, that wasn't fun. But the rest of the time, there's just an energy that happens. And it's very cathartic, especially for someone like me that gets to tell their story over and over. After all those years of nobody wanting to listen to me.
Yeah.
So that's fun. I don't know. I just don't have that many friends here anymore. And so to be able to meet people from all over the world, it's just invaluable. It is.
Now, you've been on radio and TV programs as well.
I don't think, oh yeah, I did, I guess, huh?
You did 2 TV shows. I actually got to see your list. So Near Death TV and Afterlife TV.
Yeah, yeah.
So
and the radios are fun. Except when they're live. Another thing, be careful when somebody tells you it's a radio show and it's going to be audio only. Get out of your pajamas and put on your clothes, because a lot of times they will have you in video so they can talk to you at the same time. So I only fell for that once. They said They said it was audio only. Don't believe them.
Yeah. And a lot of the podcast hosts, their session that they do with you is actually like a YouTube video. And then they strip out the audio and put that up on the podcast networks. So that's a very good point. You know, don't get caught in your PJs. Dress up for every podcast.
Yeah. That's a bad lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Also, another thing I've written down here, I love this one. Sometimes like that time when I had all that bad publicity, I always have to remind myself, bad publicity is better than no publicity. And the podcast hosts, they want their audience to be excited and involved and, come on in. So if there tends to be a little ruckus going on, they like that. They're not going to try and quell that. So don't get hysterical and panic if you think, oh my God, everybody was yelling at one another. And that's good. They get more views. So it's like being in a play. It's not all that serious. And, once you turn it off, you don't ever have to watch that video again. And believe me, your friends and family stopped watching you a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah, they got bored.
So what was the best podcast you had?
I think it was the Other Side. That's the one that got all those views. These people made a movie out of it. I mean, they had zombies walking around, and they had that person laying in the hospital, and The Other Side, it's called. Okay. And they go all out. I mean, they pitched themselves to me. We'd like to do this, and we're great, and we'll make it look like a movie. And I thought, yeah, sure, yeah. And then when it came out, I thought, oh my goodness, that is quite a production. So
Wow.
if you get a chance to watch, the music's going in the background, and oh, that was fun.
Yeah. So Jeff Mara is also another good podcaster too. He gets.
Oh yeah, he's
views.
a doll. Yeah, I did him a long time ago, like 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago in November or something. And that's when he still has ponytail, and he was just starting out, and he was a very serious young man, but he was ahead of his time, you know.
Yeah,
And so I'm just so glad he did well. Yeah,
that's
he's
cool. So do you have any others that are special, especially good or especially bad? I don't know if I want to say especially bad. Let's stay away from especially bad, because I don't
No,
want to get sued,
bad is, it's not bad, maybe troublesome or a
troublesome.
little here. I was asked to be on a show with two Greek Orthodox priests.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, that's what I thought. Well, one of them I think was trying to break a little bit from the
Right.
routine, and
Right.
the other one wasn't budget.
All right.
So, but they started at each other, and I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is interesting. I don't know if that one, I think it did air, but that one was kind of interesting. It was because I was saying that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and this one, he was all dressed in his garb. He was a good-looking guy, and he says, well, that's ridiculous. I'm a human being having a spiritual experience. The other guy says, no, you're not. And then that's when all the wheels came off the wagon on that one.
I love it.
So that was kind of interesting. And then I had a guy have me on because I used to be a property manager. I had my own company and all that. So he was talking about passive income, and we're going to get rich.
Oh my gosh.
He didn't have anything to do with my book or anything. He just got me on for this other thing. He didn't know anything about that part of me. So the more he was talking about, stealing this property and doing this and kicking the tenants out and all that, I was going, oh my God. So at the very end, he's, anything else you want to tell our investors out there?
Yes, I had a near-death experience.
What you asked for. And I said, yes, I just want to say, you can't take it with you. And you people have been involved with housing and rental properties all this time. You may want to consider donating something to the homeless. And click.
There you go.
It off real quick. And he didn't put me on for a year and a half. I kept checking back to see if I was going to be on. And one time it was on, and I just sent it back to him. And I said, I couldn't believe that you put me on. And he says, well, all of a sudden I had a hole I had to fill, and I said, oh, here's one.
There you go.
But the universe works in strange ways, huh?
Well, and that's a good point too, is that podcast hosts will interview more people than they put on. And so it could be weeks or months before you actually air. So
never.
Another thing to set expectations for people. You aren't going to go on the day that you are interviewed.
No. And always ask for the link. Remind them, don't forget to send me the link so I can put you on my social media. Well, that's for you really to find out they really aired it. I mean, you can go back and look them up and see when you should have been on there. But and I keep a file, a file of ones I've been on. I'm waiting for the link. I got another file that says they've been finished, and I got another file that says they've approached me, but we haven't finalized it yet. Keep everything. I mean, because you get to 100, you're going to forget what happened there. And you don't want anything falling through the cracks. It's a business, people.
There you go. That's a good point. Now, the Podcast Collaboration Club, they give you Excel spreadsheets, or maybe it's Google Docs with a template to where you can get started with those things and customize it.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah.
I reinvented the wheel on that one. Yeah. Well, that's good. Then use it. So
I have all of 2 on mine. So
well, good for you.
I have the Skeptic Metaphysicians, and
well, that's big. That's big.
And the Witching Hours. That's the one I'm going to be on next week. The one fun, you were on last week. Yeah,
they were very nice. You never. Some of these sound kind of iffy, and that's why you want to watch a couple of the sessions.
Right. So I actually got on with the co-host beforehand, and I said, look, I'm going to be a buzz killer. If you're all paranormal and the metaphysical, I said, I'm coming in here talking about how it's real and it aligns with physics. And I said, is that what you want? And I said, because that's not the way the title of your podcast is kind of communicating. And fortunately, but one of the hosts came back and said, we want to be like Art Bell, AM, Coast to Coast. You know, we want to interview everybody, skeptics, atheists, scientists, paranormal enthusiasts, you know, NDEers, OBEers, mediums, other intuitives. We want to do it all. And I said,
they want a bigger audience. You know, you've got to have a big audience or it doesn't work.
Yeah. So
good for you.
Yeah. So I said, okay. And I said, but just know I'm going to try to say whatever you think you've got all this woo-woo stuff. I said, no, it's physics. That's what I'm going to tell them. So we'll see how well that goes over. They may cut me off after 15 minutes, but
no, that's good. They'll get lots of people coming in with comments, and that's how they like that. They like to mix it up.
Yeah. Now talk about that on podcasts where you've had live streams. Do they ask you questions like from the chat or from, people who put comments on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and it pops up on your screen while you're talking?
Generally, they just have me tell my story, and then they'll wait for questions, and we'll talk. Sometimes there's questions. We had one lady the other night that had 8 in a row questions.
Oh, wow.
They said, "Oh, Lizzie's here tonight. We'll have plenty of questions."
Yeah.
You just never know. And if it kind of lags, then the host will fill in, asking questions till the time is up.
Well, that's cool.
Mhm.
Well, I hope we've given the audience a good appreciation for what being a podcast guest is like. So
Yeah.
we'll open the floor up for questions. So if you have a question, go down to the little menu at the bottom of your Zoom screen, click on reactions, and one of the reactions is raise your hand. And we'll ask you to unmute and ask your question. If you want to come on video, you can do that as well. And while we're waiting for them to do that, I was going to ask about name recognition and brand awareness. You know, you said you've had 300,000 views. Do you think that has really helped your brand and helped your sales and people's awareness of who you are?
I think so. Sure. The sales, like I say, are well, I read that the statistic is for all the new people that are putting out books or have been for quite some time, there's like 10,000 a day or some ridiculous number like that, that the average author is going to sell 250 books.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So I've beat that so far. And so I figure I'm better than normal. And we'll just keep going. We'll see.
Right.
It's interesting at the end of the year to get an Amazon report and all that other stuff and see, because it depends on if you sell a Kindle or you sell a book or you sell a CD or whatever. You get $1.70 for this one and $4.95 for that one. You got to sell 1 million books to make $1 million.
Right. Right. But I guess podcasting is a way to kind of, put in your legwork and do the hard work to get your name out there so that you can get on the bigger shows and get on the bigger podcasts. So this could be a way to develop yourself. And it's free once you get into it.
Number one way, I think.
Good.
And it's fun and it's free. Get you out of the house.
Well, you're in the house.
You know what I mean. That's not the house.
maybe you could do a podcast guest while you're walking in the neighborhood or something like that.
That would be nice.
That would be fun. All right.
Okay.
Well, let's see if we have any questions from the audience.
No questions. Okay.
Anyone want to raise your hand?
Totally understands.
I'm looking for it. Give you a couple minutes.
Oh, be sure you guys take the chat to the newsletter thingy. I got on a kick where I thought I've done this so often I could probably have tips for somebody. So it's on LinkedIn, and I think I did it bi-monthly for several months. I think there's 8 of them out there, and I've got like 1,551 followers, subscribers. I haven't done one in a while. I probably should do another one.
Okay. And you're making me think of something right now. Okay. Let me put up the metaphor.inc page.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sharing my screen, for people who can see, this is the metaphor.inc webpage at metaphor.ink. And if you go past Kathy's event information, we'll come down to how we support you, what the community offers you. But then down at the very bottom is something called Writer's Corner. And one of the things we talk about is being a podcast guest to advertise your book. And who wrote that? Who wrote that? Who wrote that, Kathy?
Oh, did I write that?
Yeah, you wrote that.
I did. I did. I wrote that. I ran across that the other day and I thought, what's this? And I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
Cool.
So she's already put some words of wisdom and put her experience on the line right there.
Yeah.
So it'll be good. Let's see.
Oh, that's sweet. Thanks, Patrice.
Yeah, now we do have other authors on. Oh, good. Here's a question. So, Marlene, if you could come on video and audio and ask your question for Kathy.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have a video. I don't like to do video. But how your very first experience with getting this together, the whole thing, you know, when you first started, what was your feeling? You know, how I know you were urged to do this.
Oh, you mean the book?
Your intuition, your voices. And I know I can identify with that. But I'm just wondering, how did you overcome your reticence?
You know, I think part of it was COVID. I was locked in the house and I would just go sit down and be quiet. And then ideas would start coming to me. And I just start typing. I thought I can always go back and, you know, I just, as long as I'm doing something. And it just started to flow.
Okay.
The ideas would keep coming.
That was with writing your book, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what are you talking about?
Well, after you wrote your book, how did you feel that you could get started with podcasting? Or
it took a while. I don't even know how. I think it happened. I think I just got an email from somebody saying, would you like to be on a podcast? I don't even know how that happened. I don't know if they saw something. That was a long time ago. I'd have to really think about it. It wasn't, I didn't do anything. I don't think I even knew about it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But so now it's such a common thing now. You know, you just dip your toe in and say, oh, this is new and this is kind of fun. And if you don't put it on your social media, nobody really knows you did it if it turns out terrible. But I think that after you do the first one, I just get such a rush of adrenaline when I do this. It's like a drug almost. I don't drink, I don't do anything anymore. But it's just, if it feels good, if I'm having fun, I'm going to keep doing it. If it starts to be a drag, I'm not.
Well, you're getting good feedback, right? Positive feedback, mostly.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get negative feedback. I understand that, but.
Well, I got some, but it had to do with, theology.
Yeah, that's always a stumbling block.
Yeah, especially in our field.
Yeah, it is. It's a problem.
Yeah, go for it. Try one. See what you think.
Yeah. And just to put in another plug, the more you do, the better you get, right? Oh yeah.
I don't prepare at all. I mean, this thing, I thought I was going to have to do this whole show without you being here. That's why I was so freaked out, because I'm in a podcast situation. It was take it away, Kath. It's only a 2-hour show. And I thought, oh, dear God, how am I going to do this? But see, this situation here is just like sitting in a living room talking to somebody.
Yeah.
It's not scary.
And you and I had talked to each other on these podcast collaboration club virtual mixers too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's
fun.
fun. It's kind of, you find a friend there.
Yeah. And just to put in a plug for this virtual mixer too, once a month they have video mixers, not by Zoom, but by something that's similar to Zoom. And you can get on with people who want to be podcast guests, or get on with podcast hosts around these little tables for 6 people. And you have 15 minutes. It's like speed dating for podcasting. You have 15 minutes to introduce yourself, talk about what you're doing, what you're looking to have happen, or what you're looking for, and move on. And then
Yeah.
they do that 3 times in an hour with a 15-minute introduction that the host does. And then the host has the podcast hosts on for another 15 minutes to kind of share what they learned. So it's a great way to kind of get your feet wet into podcasting.
Mhm.
I've gotten more hits off of podcastguest.com
Me too.
and then Podcast Collaboration Club. I've had people talk to me, and I've gotten some podcast interest from Podcast Collaboration Club, people I've sat with at these tables. But podcast guests will get your name out there, and people will actually give you a call, or not give you a call, they'll write you an email,
Right.
and you can respond. So thanks, Marlene. And we have another question from Jim Fisher.
Okay.
Jim?
Lost Jim.
No, just take me a minute to unmute.
Unmute. Okay.
The sense I get is that there are a lot of people now that are doing this, and that we can't expect to be making money at this so much as giving us a sense that we're contributing something to better humanity. Can you comment on that? I mean, it seems like you've put a lot of effort into it, but are you beginning to see much in the way of revenue coming in?
Let's see. I think you've got your expenses of your business too. You've got all those expenses in the books. The books, I think I sell for $15, and I think I make $5 out of by the time they get down to it. So you've got to sell a lot of books. I'll say I made net after business expenses about $1,300 last year, and this year maybe $900. But I sell a lot of books or Kindles, but at $1 a piece, it doesn't come to much. But like I say, I sold my house just before I started this. I took a chunk of money and I said, this is for your book. I still got a little left. And as long as I've got money, I'll keep going, and I'll probably throw in more, but I don't care. I like selling the books. Yes, because the message is getting out. That's what's important to me. People are reading it, and people are putting reviews really up, and it's good.
So it's not really a financial incentive. It's
no,
like we've got something that we have to communicate and share that might help others in their journey.
It's our purpose.
So I'll add a little something about making money off this. Is I've heard a lot of authors say you don't make money off your books, but you make them off the seminars and webinars that you do to talk about it, because people won't pay more than $20 for a book, but they'll pay $200 to $500 for a conference where you can tell them the same thing.
Yeah, so, that's interesting.
Yeah. So those are some things, just so that people don't feel like this is going to be a lost leader or a labor of love or whatever. If you have some ideas for making money, you'll get something. Tell us where we can find your book, Kathy.
It's on Amazon. It's called Misfit in Hell to Heaven Expat. It's by M.K. McDaniel. And it comes in a book and a Kindle and a Audible and a CD. And see, all those things cost a lot of money to have done, but you got to have it available in all these ways, so people who are hearing impaired or sight impaired can read it.
Yeah. And Daniel just put the link to Amazon in the chat for people.
Thank you.
And we actually have a question from Daniel. Daniel, would you like to ask a question?
Hey, Kathy and Mark, thank you. This has been great. I'm interested in, tell us some stories about the clashes with fundamentalists. Let's spice this up a
Oh.
little bit.
Well, I went out there telling them that, God doesn't condemn anybody and everybody goes to heaven, even atheists. And I mean, the phones were ringing off the walls. No, 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 no. They all, said that Jesus had to be your Lord and personal Savior. And it says so in the book. And they would, they had so many, they probably put the entire book, Bible up there with all the verses that they had in there and how I was going to hell again. And you just kind of have to go, oh, well, I said, I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm explaining my experience. This is just what happened to me. Well, you deserve to be in hell. Well, that's your opinion. Yeah, you just can't take it too seriously. What the truth is the truth. And they'll find out, when they roll over and nobody's there with St. Peter at the gates judging him and the life reviews happen. That's okay. We've all pre-planned our lives. They planned to come through in this mindset. And that's for them to work out.
Yeah. So Kathy, when you were talking about going to hell again, I was imagining you booking excursions as a tour guide and saying, I'll take you down there and show you all these things.
Keep your feet inside the car.
Yeah, and even recommend the 5-star hotels as opposed to 3-star hotels. They have hot showers.
Good barbecue
well
over here. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Oh, Lordy, no, I don't recommend that spot. Well, it turns out that whole thing was just sections from my life. I made my own hell. And that's what people can accidentally do. So you have to be careful about that sort of manifestation, believing something so strongly that you don't let go of it. I think another part of that was I had to forgive God for all these things I thought he rained down on me when it was really me that pre-planned them.
There you go.
Yeah.
And everyone should get your book so that they could read how to get out of hell and
right,
get to heaven.
Exactly. There's one really good secret in there.
Yeah, there you go. So, last call for questions. Anybody? Any questions from anybody? I hope you've gotten something out of this. I see some good comments in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed being here with you people. Can't see you, but I hear you.
Yeah, and this has been a good conversation. I think we've shared a lot of good information. Kathy, thank you for this. Congratulations again on your 100th podcast guest booking.
Yay.
And that was a milestone. So we really appreciate it. And we'll draw this meeting to a close. So thank you all for attending this show. How to market your book using podcasting as a podcast guest with Metaphor.Inc. and Consciousness Cafe. So thanks everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.